dysprosium, lithium, cobalt, that are essential for producing the semiconductors, electric vehicle batteries, military guidance systems, and advanced electronics that define modern technological and military power. China controls approximately 60% of global rare earth mining and approximately 85% of global rare earth processing. In April 2026, just weeks before the Beijing summit, China imposed export controls on several critical rare earth elements, specifically in response to American tariff and technology policies. The rare earth controls are one of China's most powerful economic weapons. They are the reason that American defense manufacturers, electric vehicle producers, and semiconductor companies are watching the U.S.-China relationship with alarm. If the United States readout accurately reflects what was agreed, China committed to addressing American supply chain concerns on rare earths, that would be a significant, concrete concession. If China's readout accurately reflects what was agreed, rare earths were not on the agenda. No concession was made. China's readout does not mention rare earths. Which side is accurately describing what was in the room? Contradiction 3. Taiwan. This is the most consequential contradiction, and it has received the least detailed analysis in mainstream coverage, which is exactly why Global Faultlines is addressing it here. The White House readout of the Trump-Xi summit did not mention Taiwan, not once. In a readout covering agriculture, the Strait of Hormuz, fentanyl, trade boards, and strategic stability, Taiwan appeared exactly 0 times in the official U.S. summary of a summit with China. China's readout put Taiwan at the center of the entire event. According to Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Xi told Trump directly, "The Taiwan question is the most important issue in China-U.S. relations. If it is handled properly, the bilateral relationship will enjoy overall stability. Otherwise, the two countries will have clashes and even conflicts, putting the entire relationship in great jeopardy." Fox News confirmed this asymmetry directly in its reporting. A White House readout of the subjects discussed did not include any information about Taiwan. China's version of the readout, however, included the Taiwan issue. The Council on Foreign Relations assessed the implication precisely. Taiwan is not peripheral to China's interpretation of the summit. It is central to it. In Beijing's readout, Xi stated Taiwan is the most important issue and warned mishandling it could lead to clashes and even conflicts. The White House fact sheet, by contrast, omitted Taiwan entirely. And on Air Force One, flying home from Beijing, Trump was asked about Taiwan. He said, "That question was asked to me today by President Xi. I said I don't talk about that." Secretary of State Marco Rubio added, "U.S. policy on the issue of Taiwan is unchanged as of today." Read that sequence carefully. Xi raised Taiwan as the most important issue in the relationship. Trump's response was, "I don't talk about that." Rubio said U.S. policy is unchanged. The White House readout did not mention Taiwan. China's readout made Taiwan central. What did Trump actually say to Xi about Taiwan in that room? What commitments, if any, were made? Why did America not mention it in its own readout? And why did China mention it so prominently in its readout? Those questions do not have publicly verified answers, but the gap between the two readouts on Taiwan is the most dangerous information asymmetry produced by this summit. Contradiction 4. Strategic stability. Both sides agreed to pursue constructive strategic stability. That phrase appeared in both readouts. Both governments cited it. The Council on Foreign Relations published a detailed analysis specifically examining this phrase, titled "China and the U.S. Agreed to Strategic Stability in Beijing." They don't define it the same way. The CFR's assessment? Washington wants economic calm. Beijing wants political caution. For Washington, strategic stability means trade continues, markets function, tariff war does not escalate, investment flows. It is an economic concept. It is about commerce and financial stability. For Beijing, strategic stability means America publicly accepts China's role as the world's principal counterpart. America gives rhetorical concessions on Taiwan. America acknowledges China's core interests. It is a geopolitical and status concept. It is about the architecture of the relationship. When both sides agreed to pursue constructive strategic stability, they were agreeing to a phrase. They were not agreeing to a definition, and their definitions are not compatible. The CFR called this mutually useful ambiguity. Each side got a phrase it wanted in the joint language. Each side can use that phrase to tell its domestic audience what it wants to hear. But they are describing different things. That is not agreement, that is shared vocabulary concealing divergent objectives. Now let us examine what Brookings identified as the meta-level lesson of the summit, because it captures something that individual contradiction analysis misses. Brookings stated it directly. The post-summit readouts make it clear that there are two different sets of priorities in Beijing and Washington. The Trump administration placed emphasis on trade, commercial ties, and investment, while Chinese leaders put focus on a new bilateral framework. Washington came to sell, Beijing came to establish. Trump wanted to come back with deals he could announce, numbers he could post on Truth Social, things he could call fantastic trade deals. A Xi visit to Washington in September, a narrative of winning. Xi wanted something different and more durable. He wanted the United States to conduct a state visit to China, with all the ceremony and prestige that implies, thereby acknowledging China's status as America's co-equal. He wanted rhetorical concessions on Taiwan placed on the record in China's official readout where they cannot be fully retracted. He wanted the phrase constructive strategic stability to anchor a new bilateral framework where China is America's principal global counterpart. The CFR described the outcome precisely. This looks like G2 choreography, but not G2 architecture. Choreography, shared performance, a state visit, a banquet, the Temple of Heaven, handshakes for cameras, both leaders performing the partnership. Architecture, the actual structure of the relationship, the binding commitments, the verifiable numbers, the mechanisms for enforcement, the answers to the question, what happens when one side doesn't comply? On those questions, the readouts reveal that the architecture was not built in Beijing. On agriculture, two different numbers. On rare earths, only one side mentioned them. On Taiwan, only one side mentioned it. On strategic stability, the same phrase, two different definitions. Here is the strategic picture that Global Faultlines is here to provide. The Trump-Xi-Beijing summit of May 2026 produced something that will look, in the historical record, like a significant event. State visit, 48 hours of meetings, photographs at symbolic Chinese landmarks, joint communiques. What it did not produce, on the evidence of the two readouts and the expert analysis of Brookings, CFR, NPR, and FPRI, is a shared agreement on any of the three most consequential issues currently at stake in the U.S.-China relationship. Taiwan. One side raised it as the most important issue and warned of conflict. The other side did not mention it. Rare earths. One side said a commitment was made. The other side's readout contains no such commitment. Agriculture. One side cited a $17 billion purchase figure. The other side cited no number. And on the overarching strategic framework, both sides agreed to pursue something they are defining in fundamentally different ways. The SCMP said China saw this as an opportunity, and the U.S. didn't. The CFR said it produced mutually useful ambiguity, not a breakthrough. Brookings said there are two different sets of priorities. NPR said there are minor inconsistencies, but then quoted analysts saying those inconsistencies matter. The Brookings analyst said directly that China's failure to mention rare earths in its readout is concerning, not minor, concerning, because rare earth export controls are one of China's most significant economic weapons in this relationship, and if China made no commitment to address them in Beijing, then the American claim that it did makes no sense. There is an additional dimension that the Foreign Policy Research Institute highlighted, the Taiwan arms sale. On Air Force One flying home from Beijing, Trump was asked about the $14 billion Taiwan arms package approved by Congress. He said, "I'll be making a decision." That decision has still not been announced. The Taiwan Legislative Yuan, before Trump departed for Beijing, approved its long-delayed special defense budget funding two large U.S. arms sales packages. That budget approval was passed in Taipei while Trump was in Beijing. Trump's response to questions about it, on the plane home, was deliberate ambiguity. "I'll be making a decision." That is not the response of a president who feels he made a clear commitment to Xi on Taiwan behind closed doors. But it is also not the response of a president who definitively rejected any Chinese expectations about Taiwan. It is the response of a president managing optionality, keeping every door open, committing to nothing, which is, perhaps, the honest summary of the entire Beijing summit. This is Global Faultlines. We track the forces shaping the world. for not just the summits, but what the summits actually reveal. What the Beijing Summit of May 2026 revealed, on close reading of both readouts, guided by Brookings, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Foreign Policy Research Institute, and NPR's comparative analysis, is this. The world's two largest economies conducted a choreographed event designed to signal partnership while maintaining incompatible positions on every issue that actually matters. On the issue that matters most to China, Taiwan, China placed its warning on the record, while America stayed silent. On the issues that matter most to America, rare earths, agriculture volumes, Hormuz, tariffs, the commitments America described do not fully appear in China's readout. Two sides, same room, two different summits. The Council on Foreign Relations ended its analysis with a sentence worth quoting in full. Trump has repeatedly shown interest in great power bargaining, and Xi welcomes being treated as Washington's principal counterpart. But a summit is not a strategy, and ambiguity, however useful, has a cost, particularly when the gaps between the two governments' definitions of stability are large enough to drive a doctrine through. A summit is not a strategy, and ambiguity, however useful, has a cost. That cost will be paid, not in the photographs from Beijing, but in what happens next, when the $17 billion agricultural commitment is or is not fulfilled, when the rare earth controls are or are not lifted, when the Taiwan arms decision is or is not made, when Xi's warning about clashes and conflicts becomes the lens through which the next crisis in the Taiwan Strait is interpreted. Washington came away advertising deals. Beijing came away advertising a doctrine. One of them will be proven right. This is Global Faultlines. See beyond the headlines.